What do you got for us?
Well, sadly, Harry McKay won't be lining up for anyone for a long time. It's 6 to 8 weeks, the expected timeline, as detailed by the Blues just moments ago. So they've described it as a clean-out, Gerard, an arthroscope of his knee after landing awkwardly, of course, in the first quarter of that big win over Port Adelaide. So it's 6 to 8 weeks, they say unrelated to the meniscus damage from last year, completely fresh injury.
Doesn't mean there's not new meniscal damage, though. I mean, if it was a medial meniscus, you would think you could clean that up within, and be back on the park within 4 weeks. I suspect it's got something to do with the lateral meniscus. But the good news, and we can say, shocking news, but
No
it
ACL.
looked for all intents and purposes like the ACL was going to be at risk. So that was a fantastic sigh of relief.
Yeah, so they're saying cleared of any ligament damage. We'll have that arthroscope this week as soon as possible, you would have thought. So that's 6 weeks, takes him to the end of the home and away, so that's wiped out, and then another 2 weeks in the finals. So you'd say just about season over unless Carlton can somehow not only make the 8, but then go deep into September.
How much do you think it will hurt them, Gerard? I'm not sure it's going to hurt them as much as what we think it may on the surface.
I think you've got to have your big guns available. He hasn't had a great season. And there's no question that when he went off, it just funneled everything back into one particular person. But they were playing pretty good footy when he was out on the ground as well. And you're better off having 2 than 1 just in case the other one goes down as well.
How far away is Pitnet? I mean, time frames on injuries are ridiculous, so it's hard to keep up. But if he comes back...
TDK comes in.
TDK goes forward.
Yep.
And then you've got the 2 there as well. So I just think structurally, and then Silvani steps up.
Well, Silvani was a great replacement in many respects, wasn't he? He was terrific. It'll be really good for his career to see how he goes over the next 6 weeks.
So to answer your question on Pitnet, still a week to week. That's all they will
What's
say.
that mean?
Week upon week. Well, it's a week
Short
assessment.
term, medium, or long term?
Yeah, but no, they're not. Well, look, I mean,
What's
I think
all
it's
of the above?
I don't have a problem with a week-to-week assessment. They're clearly trying to get him right, but the knee's not responding, so it is what it is. What is interesting, though, is buried underneath this news on Harry McKay is the revelation that Adam Chera, who's been in form absolutely this year, has hamstring tightness and will be a test to play this week. So.
Awareness.
Have a spell against the Eagles, I think.
The old awareness, if you like. And by the way, Carlton's this run has a big hurdle ahead of it in terms of Collingwood awaiting in round 20, the top of the table pies. Already, general public tickets for this game on Friday, July 28, sold out. It's a fully ticketed event. No further tickets to be released. That'll be huge.
Love Brayden Maynard's commentary after the game. Bring your A game.
I love that
We're
as
on
well.
top of the ladder for a reason.
I've got that to play after 6 o'clock, and I actually really enjoyed that as well. MRO news, busy weekend again.
Yeah, very busy. So we await word on a few incidents from the Sunday game. So that's Dustin Martin, the elbow to Alex Witherden, John Newcomb, the tummy punch, if you like, on Harry Sheasel. Both of those we await word on. But a strange match review weekend. I mean, to find Zach Merritt for staging, we've sat here many times and discussed how various players have escaped the staging sanction, and to then turn around and whack the Essendon captain with that one, I was staggered.
It wasn't even the worst we've seen this year.
Oh, far from the worst we've seen. You could probably name a worse dozen than that. So a $1,500 fine on top of that heavy loss for the Bombers, just bewildering, really. Also bewildered by the fact that Essendon aren't challenging it. I thought a written submission for sure, just out of principle, you would do that. But no, they're going to swallow the $1,500 sanction and get on with it. Josh Rochelle as well, in terms of swallowing things, has accepted that 2-match ban. He had to. That was a complete and utter meltdown against GWS, Jack Butley. Jordan Boyd will appear at the tribunal tomorrow. That's the 3-match trigger, of course, a dangerous tackle on Darcy Byrne-Jones. Sydney, we know, this is really interesting scenario, isn't it? They're going to challenge that Dane Rampy 2-match ban for that off-the-ball collision with Lachie McNeil, who suffered the delay concussion, played out the game. Concussion was diagnosed in the aftermath.
He got no hope.
Careless high and high. He's unlucky, Rampy, and John Longmire spoke on this today. So Sydney are going to base this on the fact that he's come up and doing what he's coached to do, and that's check an opponent's run, you know, given he's moving to receive the ball on the lead, and it's actually the Western Bulldogs players change of direction that has instigated the contact. So they're going to argue that, hey, Dan Rampy was fine. It was Lachie McNeil that changed his direction.
Any nuclear physiotherapist joining the defence?
Might be one for the bio.
Yeah, he's got no hope of getting off that because of the delayed concussion. If you go to bump off the ball and the person that you bump has concussion, now in 2023, no hope. But 10 years ago, good move, terrific defence.
Well, I think this is it. I mean, you've got sympathy for Dane Rampy, and we do with most players in this instance because they're not trying to knock his block off. But as you say, you've instigated the contact, so you put yourself in the victim's position here. If contact isn't instigated, then Lachie McNeil is fine. He doesn't get concussed, and he's playing next week. AFLW fixture locked in as well, guys, as well. A lot of conjecture about this. A big standoff between the AFLPA and the AFL. In the end, the AFL won. No surprises there. It's going to be the 10 games, the home and away, with the 4 weeks of the finals. It starts with Melbourne, the defending champion, of course, taking on Collingwood. It's at Icon Park, September 1. And the grand final will be December 1 or 2, where they go with a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon. So the AFL had opened with, forget it. It's going to be 10 games for not only next season, but the next 9 years. That's our opening gambit. They ended up getting them, the AFLPA, to a position where they've guaranteed that they will commit to growth in future years starting next year with the AFLW season. So swallowed the 10 for now with the verbal agreement, if you like, that they will bump that up next year and potentially beyond.
We're not sure to how many they'll bump it up.
Well, they wanted 12 this year with an agreement that they would then go to 14, 16, 18. They have so, cool your jets. We've got some metrics we want to achieve on that front before we just tick off on an expanded
What about the
competition.
grand final? Is that still going to be dependent upon who's playing?
I don't know the answer to that at this stage, Gerard. All I have is the date. So they're interesting. They've put December 2 as a Saturday. They put December 1 down as well as a potential, which will be a Friday night.
All right, Gerard and I last Wednesday or Thursday discussed the future of Ken Hinckley and whether the move on Stewie Dew was designed to get in the face of Hinckley before the August deadline. How do you see it, and what is the latest in your eyes?
I wanted to ask you the same thing as the unofficial Port Adelaide spokesman, but I don't think from a Gold Coast point of view, first and foremost, this is going to be anything close to a process. So there will be a hit list and there will be a headhunt. And that's probably being a little bit more open-minded than some who are close to this, who firmly believe that this is Damien Hardwick's job, regardless of how it might be dressed up by the club. Now, the Sun search starts here, and it most likely ends here. It isn't a big fishing net. It's just a single lure on the rod. And if Dimmer's in, then I think he's in. But then there's Ken Hinckley, who would love to stay at Port Adelaide if they want him to stay as much. So if Gold Coast, as people around this suggest, would be a 5-year contract for someone like Ken Hinckley, would he take 3 with no conditions at Port Adelaide? I think he would. If it's 2, if it's condition-laden, I think it's going to be very hard for him to stay. The other factor in this is his long-time football manager and his running mate in Chris Davies. Now, as Chris Davies is being sanded up by the AFL for a role there alongside or underneath Brendan Gale, not to say that it would fully sway Ken's decision, but they go a long way back. And shouldn't be underestimated how much Chris has done for Ken in terms of just keeping him shielded, if you like, from all the outside noise, everything around him. He does his job and he does it very well. So it's very different to the Richmond process. You speak to player managers who manage coaches, and Richmond are working the phones all the time. What's the list look like? Who's available? Who's interested? We're not getting that from Gold Coast.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. It's sort of to what we discussed last week, wasn't it? If there's a 5-year deal from Gold Coast, I don't think Port can give him any more than 2, and I wouldn't probably give him any more than 2 at Port, maybe 2 with some triggers and some clauses on final success. That's the way I would see it.
So does that make it hard for him?
Well, it does. I think it makes it easy. I think you're taking 5 at Gold Coast versus 2.
Hard to stay at Port Adelaide.
Port, but everyone keeps saying that it is Damien Hardwick's job at Gold Coast. I don't necessarily subscribe that he is the one. But would Hinckley be a fit at Richmond, Gerard?
Possibly. I think he's a fit at Port Adelaide personally, and I think if he gets 2, I'd be taking the 2. I think Ken Hinckley needs a premiership more than he needs anything else to finish off his coaching career. And right now, I mean, there are no certainties to even make the prelim final this year. There's still a long way to go in this season, but Ken Hinckley and that group have grown together, and they look like they're a pretty good fit, particularly if they can find themselves a very tall and robust defender.
It's yes, indeed.
Yes.
Well, maybe that for down the track, Gerard.
Okay.
Maybe now not quite the right time. But I find the coaching merry-go-round as fascinating as any year that it's ever been. And if you are a career coach like we suspect Ken well and truly is, he loves it, he's been open about that, he's enjoying it now more than ever, then what a great list to have at Gold Coast. You don't have to build anything. It's there. Another 3 academy kids potentially to come in.
Some talent there.
There's some enormous talent there. And I know they've had difficulties. They haven't played a final before, heaven forbid. But, geez, you get your hands on that list. It's there, I reckon.
All right, you can have your say on that. The Harcourt's open line, 1300 736 736. Is there any trade news that we need to be across? Is that... No, just across the board. How busy a period do you think it will be? Because on the surface of it looks pretty quiet because there's a lot of players that have recommitted. Parrish and Redmond.
Any big names considering their
I think
positions?
so. Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. So while it might be not the glut of trade activity we saw,
Big
it
names.
might be quality.
Okay.
Might be quality more than quantity. At a guess, it's very early. We're talking July, but I think there might be enough.
All right, who does your club need? If you can get one that you feel like they're gettable, because I think there's a few clubs that would need a ruckman, including
trouble. You
do you reckon?
Tall defenders and ruckman.
Yeah,
Intercept marking
they
defenders.
They are worth their weight in gold, aren't they? How do you see that? Everyone's had their say on Gawn and Grundy. I feel like the issue is a little bit old, but is there any way that you could see him at a third club?
No, I don't think so.
What do you think, Gerard? Yeah, absolutely. I think I could see him at a third club.
Right.
I mean, if he wants to be the number one ruckman, it would appear that Max is the number one ruckman now. They've made that decision. They look like they're a better side with Max as the number one ruckman. So it's got a fair way to play out. I think he will play a significant role for Melbourne for the rest of this season, and then it'll be...
When you say significant role...
Yeah,
I think
what's significant role?
I think Max would need a rest between now and the end of the season.
Manage him. Yeah.
Manage him. He could play forward. They could have a look at that. I mean, they've experimented with half a dozen people. But as I'll say after 7 o'clock, in my observations in the absence of Hodgie, if he does stay, then a couple of their tall forwards, they've got to go.
Mm.
So Max is at the peak of his powers, no, unmistakably. And he can't be unseated.
How long's he got?
But he's 32 in December.
Yeah.
I just think it depends what Brodie wants out of his career. Is he happy just to, for lack of a better phrase, bide his time, stay in Melbourne, which is what he wanted to do 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Port Adelaide were interested, GWS, I want to stay in Melbourne. And the Demons came for him in the end. It was a decision from a Melbourne point of view that puzzled us at the time, puzzles us even more now, Kane. But it really depends what Brodie wants to do.
Yep. Well, that's going to be a real challenge for him because I think he was sold on the idea that Max goes forward and he's going to be still the number one ruckman. But now that's changed. So the parameters have changed and there'll be other clubs coming looking for him. But talk about sliding doors. He doesn't go to the Giants. Yeah. Kieran Briggsy emerges, and he's the number one rated ruck in the game.
He's a lot cheaper than Brodie Grundy.
He's
a lot cheaper. Yeah. All right, Sammy, you got the latest tribunal news?
Yeah, the match review's just landed, Kane. So Dustin Martin, we mentioned earlier, the striking against Alex Witherden, fine, and a fine only. It was intentional, yes, but it was low impact, Michael Christian said, and to the body. So that's a decent whack. That's a $5,000 fine, that sanction. But then John Newcombe was the other one. That was striking Harry Sheasel. Intentional, low impact again, body contact, $3,000 for him. So
this goes to my point about the Brownlow medal. And it's just an absolute nonsense that guys can now be fined for what they were suspended for over 100 years and win the Brownlow medal despite the fact they've been guilty of an elbow and a punch. And yet some poor blighter has dragged a bloke down with a legitimate tackle.
Yep.
Unfortunately, there's been head contact with the ground. And Zach Merritt can't win the Brownlow medal because of a tackle. I mean, it just belies belief.
Well, the concussion,
beggars belief.
Yeah, everything to the head we know, amplified more
I
than
understand
ever before.
this, but we've gone from it's like those who argue that it shouldn't be the case, so it's best and fairest. Well, you're letting people off that have elbowed, that have done things outside the rules for 100 years, and we're pinging guys for accidents. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
At a Brownlow medal stage.
I agree with it. Sarong can't win the Brownlow for a tackle that was legal for up until
a long time
now versus that. So hard to argue with that. If you've got a thought, you can join in with us as we get into the observations this afternoon. He's passionate. And it's another one for the list.
Oh, the list is there. That's on the list.
For the CEO. The new CEO has got
CEO
a long list.
Or for whoever takes over football, whenever that happens.
Observation number one. And this may be a bit harsh, but that can be the case on a Monday night.
Well, don't apologise now.
It's been a long year.
What are you feeling all right?
It's been a long day. It's been a long year.
Mate, don't let JJ get to you like that.
The Saints have lost 4 of their last 5, with the only win coming against the hopeless Eagles by 8 points. So that was as good as a loss. So let's give them 5 losses in a row. They've kicked scores of 51, 58, 85 with the circle because that was against the hopeless Eagles, 56 and 70 points in the last 5 weeks. As I've been saying for a month, they are no better this year than what they were last year, but I'm prepared to go a step further. They're worse than last year, and there'll be some numbers that would back that up in terms of scores for, scores against, and some other key statistics when they sacked their coach because they thought their list was better than what they were capable of. So I just don't think anything now, apart from the solid start, the questions that we had over the Saints, Gerard, have been answered to the point where they thought they were going to be. And the language from Ross now is starting to change about he needs another preseason. He needs to discover the list. And he's sort of
the list. The bloody list is going to be under
He said that all year,
yes.
but the language has started to change to the point where he's saying, if my good players don't play well, there's nothing underneath. There's nothing underneath that.
And bumbling, fumbling mess. Yeah.
So that's different to, I'll give them a mulligan. We've been pretty good. We've been competitive.
Well, that was true at the time.
Yeah, but that's changed now. They're no better than what they were last year, and they'll miss the 8. Okay, the Saints will miss the 8. Observation number 2, and this is a message to North, and it's not a crack at Sonia Hood, but we can do without the apologies for performances. I'll spit that out. We don't need any more apologies. So she sent out a statement saying yesterday's performance was very disappointing. Everyone knows that, the supporters, the players, the coaches, the staff, and we also know that the only way out of this is to keep working hard, get better where we can, and change what we need to, stay positive and stick together. It says nothing to me. We need to keep working hard. Well, you'd hope you're working hard. We need to get better where we can. What does that mean? We need to get better where we can. I don't know what that means, and we need to change what we need to. What does that mean? So let's just have the actions do more talking than words, and I don't think the apologies, again, for performances like that against a team you should be beating does any favours. North fans, I've been hard on you, but I'm happy to take your calls. Do you need statements from the president apologising for performances? And those statements not saying a whole lot.
Because if they don't, over time, we say, well, they're invisible. Well, they're the invisible president. Why aren't they speaking?
Well,
why don't they own it? Why don't they get in front of it?
Viney and when Alistair Clarkson comes back, they've got key leaders at the club to defend the football performance.
So if Todd Viney tweeted that, you'd be okay with it?
No, I don't want Todd Viney to tweet that. I want him to get up and answer the questions that the fans have. What is happening with the list? Where do you need to get better? Saying we need to get better where we can. What does that mean? We need to get better where we can. Todd, where do you need to get better? Is what I would want.
Everywhere?
Yeah, I would have thought so. So no more apologies. And just on North, observation number 3, if any club out there is going to pay Ben McKay more than the average wage, they are crazy.
What's the average wage for a tall defender?
$4.50, Gerard.
Chasing double that, is that?
I've heard 9s. I've refused to believe 9s, Sammy.
Don't know. No, this is just
you do know now. What's he chasing?
I don't know. I'd be reluctant to go anywhere
with
near
that grin on your face.
No, I don't. Would Port Adelaide
7+?
If Port Adelaide,
would Port Adelaide prefer him or Asava Radigalea?
I think they're into Asava.
Well, they've had heavy conversations about both, to be truthful. But would Asava come cheaper than Ben McKay? Possibly not.
If my club paid Ben McKay $900 on what I saw yesterday, I would microwave my membership.
What would you
that
be
was
prepared
tongue in cheek?
What would you be prepared to pay Asava?
Asava would be. He would.
Like
be
you can't get a game for Geelong at the moment.
Yeah, I understand, but to move clubs, to fill a need, I don't think there's a lot of salary cap pressure there. I'd be happy to pay him 6.
He's such a fascinating story, I find. Like, he was convinced to stay, reinvented as a defender, and you looked at the list and you thought, how does he fit? And he fit early because they had a few injuries.
Yeah.
Now that they're all back, it's become a bit of a dilemma for them down there.
Jeez, I'd love to be promoting him. I think he's one of the great untapped talents. And Chris Scott knows that. He's desperate to keep him.
But how does he fit him in?
I don't know how he does that. Maybe he is...
DeConing's the future. Henry's rock solid.
It was the
Tom
right
Stewart,
move,
though,
to not let him go for a trade when he's contracted. Because who knows what happens with Stewart may get injured.
You've got the whip hand there.
DeConing gets injured from time to time.
And he was needed.
Henry gets injured. Kolodjasny. So, I mean... Depth, that's what I like Geelong for.
What's his marketplace value, though, Sam? Can you get 800 for him?
No, I don't think so.
Can you get 700?
I don't think so. I think it'd be I think Port, if they were to come, should come with a long deal, spread that money. It would sound big on paper, but you spread that money across who knows what it might be.
Yeah. So if Port Adelaide gave an 8-year deal, Kane's going to get the microwave out again.
Would you?
I'd get the bonfire out. Observation number 4. What about Petracca's response? So 2 weeks ago, I, in this segment, was critical of his ball use. He kicked 12-19 for the year and was butchering the footy a little bit by foot, Gerard. In the last 2 weeks, he went into the game with 12-19, and since then he's kicked 8-1. And I just... Like, his game on Friday night, he just willed himself to have a big influence on that. Whether it was forward, whether it was at forward stoppages, whether it was in the midfield. whatever it was, he just sensed the moment. I just thought it was, if you want to be great and you want to be a determined AFL footballer, if I was a youngster, I'd go and get a tape of that game from Christian Petracca.
When he plays like that, he's the best player in the game.
I reckon you're right.
Yep.
Yeah.
He was unstoppable.
Unstoppable.
He just mesmerised the Brisbane defence.
On the lead, at stoppage, on the ground, through the midfield. So, yeah, what a player he was, and that's had immediate impact. It's a big effort to kick 8 goals in 2 weeks when you're a traditional midfielder. Observation number 5. There's a couple more victims to the long-term contract curse I just want to put on the agenda.
I'll update. Hang on. I'll open my spreadsheet.
Update your list.
I'll open
Get the Excel.
I'll open my
and
spreadsheet.
go to the tab with the long-term contract curse.
I'm ready.
How's Jake Saligo going since he signed till 2029?
Well, he's out of the side right now.
And has he got company in that locker room?
And how's Josh Rioli going?
I knew you were going to go
Since
there.
he signed until 2029. Something happens, and
Coincidental?
it is subconscious that you get comfortable when that deal extends a long time out.
Surely,
it just
Kane,
happens
no, but surely
too many times.
You can't tell me that 5 minutes into the first quarter he's thinking about the paperwork at home.
Subconsciously,
No.
something happens.
So the ball's there on the wing and he's thinking, wow,
he got ahead of himself.
I've got that fat contract at home. I don't need to chase that
you
bloke.
get a big head, you get the media attention, you get the big paycheck, and all of a sudden you're chasing blokes off the ball and punching them in the head and getting 2 weeks.
That was one of the more disappointing elements of the year for a young kid to do that, who was in such great form. Well, he's been building a really good year, and unfortunately, the Crows desperately need him, and he's going to be sitting in the grandstand, as you said.
Fine line, because
big games.
that's everything that makes him great and what he is. So he's effervescent. He's an extrovert. He's a character. He's going to bring people through the turnstiles.
Mate,
he's going to
right
energize.
To the chin.
He's going to energize his
when
side.
was the last time you saw that in a game of football?
Agreed. But then there's a fine line between
player.
being on the edge and going over the edge, and we've seen players do that often.
Yeah, I'm in the front row of the Josh Rioli fan club as well.
As am I.
Yeah, he's something else, and I think, and the way that he spoke,
He'll never do that again.
The way that he spoke after the game was doorstop. He was really mature. He owned it, and he will get better from this. And we do stupid things as young players, but that was bizarre. But I just want to note those for the long-term contract curse. And finally, Nick, I loved this from Brayden Maynard.
We love every challenge that comes our way. We're sitting on the top of the ladder for a reason, so important to bring the A game because we're coming over there and we've got to give it our best.
It's good for the game.
How good.
We don't see and hear players speak like that, and there's only a few players in the league that can speak like that because you know they're going to back it up. When the footy's there, you know he's going to put his head over it and win it. And I just think, I mentioned him as a potential captain for Collingwood before Darcy Moore got it. Now he hasn't been that, and the club has made the right call, you feel, with Darcy Moore, but he's equally as important spiritually, and I just think it builds up the game on Saturday night, and when the footy is there, he will back up his words with actions.
And the dangerous tackle crackdown, and boy, hasn't there been one, has done nothing to, I guess, ease his thirst to lay a hard tackle. To be damned with it, he would appear. He's just driving blokes in the turf all over the place.
Yeah, I got a picture of Brayden Maynard in a collision of some description sent to me from the WA, which I didn't know the context of because I didn't see that particular game or enough of that game. I saw about a half, but I didn't see that incident. Was he involved in an incident that was controversial?
No, but there are a couple of ferocious tackles that you had to admire. But, I mean, at another time and place, he could have been unlucky, as we said earlier, and he's doing time.
He nailed someone.
Chad Wingard, he absolutely nailed in the pocket, and he nailed someone on the broadcast wing as well. Absolutely ferocious tackle.
Did you happen to see Maurice Rioli Jr. refuse to accept the phone from the coach after he was subbed out,
I've seen it on the Fox Sports website, but I didn't see that.
How would you handle that moment?
I thought the coach handled it well.
So
Defused it publicly, he'll deal with it privately.
Yep.
That's the old saying, isn't it, for a coach? Encourage publicly, discipline privately.
Yep.
You would think he would say, so. You got to take the. It wasn't from him by all reports specifically, but still from the coach's box.
No.
The dog and bone gets passed along.
Well, the other thing he can do is just have a quick word to him and just say, you're in the early game next week.
All right. A lot of I think that'll happen too. A lot of text coming through. Hi, boys. As a long-suffering North supporter, remember, I unfortunately now agree with Kane. I took my 11-year-old son to the game yesterday. He is trying so hard to support the club. However, it is so hard. The same debacle week after week, month after month, year after year. 11 wins in nearly 4 years. And yes, completely sick of the on-field performances and the spin from the president members' letters. Go well, says that text.
Marty from Phillip Island down the Gippsland Highway.
G'day, Kano. What about the tagging on Petracca a Friday night? At what point is the tagging now just not tagging and holding a player and stopping a player from doing what they are supposed to do? I thought they umpired that pretty well, and it was magnificent craft from Christian Petracca because the attention they were giving him, he was throwing his arms back.
He got a couple of free kicks,
he was
which
exaggerating,
was
Gerard. He was making sure the umpires saw it. I just thought he played it really well. It was the sign of an experienced player and perhaps something that Josh Kelly could learn from when he gets tagged next.
Are you concerned about Zak Butters? I reckon his form dropped off the last couple of weeks, and then on the weekend he sat out with a groin issue.
Yeah, I'm always worried about his body.
Because he works to the death.
Yeah, and he's a small man. He's not like those powerful midfielders like De Goey that have a bit more resilience and a bit more muscle on their frame. And his history of injuries is a little bit concerning. I don't know how serious the groin issue is, but he didn't have a clearance, which didn't have one clearance for the game.
No, he's just tailed off, and I suspect it's got everything to do with some sort of groin injury, whether it's a little hernia starting to develop, is a tendonitis. Who knows what it is, but he's not the player he was a few weeks ago.
All right, Gerard, I'm being told we're going to get a couple of your observations now, and then we're going to hold a couple over for after the next.
And Odgie sends his apologies, but says he'll be back next week. My first one is the size of the MCG. Now, there's no denying Brisbane's win-loss ratio at the G, but please don't insult our intelligence, as I heard one of my favourite analysts do on the weekend, and attribute it to, quote-unquote, possibly the size of the ground. Such flat earth logic struggles when given even primary school scrutiny. Now, I'm sure the ground size didn't change in quarters 2 and 3, where Brisbane dominated, kicking 12 goals to 6. So let's move on from the ground size nonsense.
He provided years of historical data, though, didn't he, for their defensive. So the suggestion was that they can't defend the ground at the MCG, given its vast size compared to the Gabbatoir.
But the Gabbatoir is not that much smaller. So they seem to defend it fairly easily.
Who was our favourite
I'm
analyst?
not in the business.
Who was our favourite analyst?
Seemed to defend it well in the second and third quarters. We'll move on to umpiring. It's such an important part of the game, but we need them to play the free kicks that are there. No magic numbers, just the amount of free kicks not paid is alarming. And on the weekend, Toby Green took what would have been one of the greatest marks ever taken in the history of this game. He was at third floor level. It was incredible, spoiled only by a Crows player that dragged his arm down. As Toby said at the end of the match, it was a free kick every day of the year. 100% Toby. Question for the umpire. Given Toby was on top of somebody's shoulders and took the ball at its highest point, how do you actually think a mere mortal that couldn't fly was going to get his hand that high to legitimately spoil it?
That was a bad miss.
It was a shocking miss because it was a great mark that unfortunately didn't get recognised.
I don't like to play favourites, but that's as good a opening 2 observations as I've heard while I've been sitting here.
Oh, okay.
That's a very sharp...
I better sharpen up mine for next week.
You were in full flow with your observations. So this is rare form sort of stuff.
Oh, okay. I didn't think it was that strong.
No,
but,
I think it's magnificent. Okay. I hope you got North's priority pick in there as well.
I haven't got that, but I think that's a clear, obvious one. I'll go number 3, Sam Taylor. Last year's All-Australian centre-back missed. He's missed. I think he's played 10 games so far this year, so he's missed a fair bit through injury. But he's back playing at that esteemed level. Saturday night he was game BOG by a clear margin, despite not getting a vote from our team over in SEN, and he's making a run to retain his All-Australian spot. It'd be a pinch, given he's probably only going to play 16 or so games.
So he'd miss 8.
He'd miss 8. He's in rare form.
I wonder what question without notice. I wonder what the fewest games played is to get into that.
14.
14?
I think so. Might be 16. Toby Green, Josh Kelly, Sam Taylor and Lockie Whitfield should all be in the All-Australian squad. How many get selected will be up to the selectors. Moving on to number 4, Ben King. What to do with Ben King? Dermot's commentary was quite insightful on the weekend. He said he's had enough. They need to find another position. Well, at the start of the year, I suggested to Wayne Campbell on air that Ben King should be trialled as a centre-half back, which was the position that he played as a junior. And given that I think at the time they needed another key defender, it seemed to be a fairly logical move. But that position, unfortunately, has now been filled with Mac Andrew, who they're also looking at being a long-term intercept defender. But his form remains a serious issue. What the solution is unknown, but it certainly needs to be turned around.
Goalless the last 3. He did have 33 after 15 rounds and has 33 18 on the season. So it's not a diabolical contribution coming back out of injury, but it's a watch.
Oh, it's a watch. I mean, maybe just send him down there for 4 weeks just to get some confidence back.
It's where he played a lot of his juniors.
Indeed, he did. Number 5. Now, while the footy world is rightly obsessed with second-year wonder child Nick Dacos, another is emerging in Sydney who is in just his 3rd year. Errol Gulden is the best wingman midfielder in the game right now, whose left foot is so damaging he's a near certainty for the wing position in the All-Australian team.
You watch Don Longmire after the games when they win.
Yeah.
We know he's a very touchy-feely horse, but he saves his biggest bear hug for that young man. He picks him up and he almost squeezes the life out of him.
Well, he was he BOG on the weekend? Did he get the 9 or the 10 coaches' votes?
You're the coaches' vote specialist.
I'll just have a look here. It was on Thursday. Marcus Bontempelli, he got 8. He got 10, and Errol got 8.
Right.
So he's having a fantastic year, as is the Bont. We move on to clarity. Clarity required.
On what front?
What is your decision, umpire? Now, when a player is tackled to the ground with one arm pinned and the ball under the other, and he doesn't release the ball, what should the decision be? Because I've seen it paid holding the ball, and I've seen it paid ball up in the same game.
Is there prior opportunity?
It doesn't matter, and I'll tell you why it doesn't matter. Because once you are dragged to the ground and you don't have prior opportunity, you are still there under obligation
to try
to get rid of the ball. Now, the fact is...
To try.
Well, you've got to release it.
No. If you don't have prior, you've got to still show intent.
Well, how do you show intent?
Well, you've seen them. They hump like whales out in the middle.
No, the ball
use their eyebrows.
The ball is in your hand.
Yeah.
You've only got one option.
But they're lying on top of you, yeah?
No, often not lying on top of you. You are obligated to get rid of the ball. I saw one bloke get rid of the ball the other day, and what happened? They paid a free kick. So what you're saying to him is, do not release the ball even though you can. I find that an extraordinarily... I've had a long chat to Hayden Kennedy about this.
Yeah.
I don't think they've got a solution. So
it's better to not try to get pinged for
we're in
incorrect
this
disposal.
state of confusion, and we'll just put up with the confusion. One final one, Melbourne. Well, they've rightly made the call. We had a discussion about this. Grundy as a forward to perhaps reintroduce him later on is the right call by Melbourne, but obviously the question mark is what happens next year. If Grundy does make it, then you're putting the question mark on to Ben Brown and Tom McDonald. So a season and an off-season of some discussion for the Demons.
Indeed it is. Now, I want to ask you, you're down at Docklands, Harbour Esplanade, you're at AFL headquarters, you're sitting around the mahogany table, the submission comes in from North Melbourne.
Yep.
We want a priority pick. What are you saying if you're making the decision on behalf of the league and the competition?
Well, you firstly take it on consideration because that's what they do down there. You've got to consider these things for a period of time.
Okay.
Then you give them a priority pick.
Right. So they've won 11 games since the start of 2020.
Yep.
So 11 games in 4 seasons, we think it might be. That's surely criteria for some sort of priority selection.
Well, if you put yourself in the shoes of Wardlaw or, say, LDU or Sheasel, or even, I'm talking about guys that have been there for the 3 or 4 years. They've won 11 games in 4 years. That's not what this competition is about. You don't get drafted. You would be dreading getting drafted to a club if you're going to play in 11 wins in 4 years. And the AFL competition, like they did with Melbourne, when Melbourne were in similar dire straits, they've got to sort it out. Otherwise, kids are going to say, we don't want to go there. And that's what was happening at Melbourne. And that's why Paul Roos and Gil McLachlan got together and said, Roosie, we need to address this. And we need to address this in a hurry. Otherwise, someone's going to challenge our rules.
And I know they dabbled with it, the AFL last year. They gave them the 2 future picks, but they said, hey, you have to trade them. I'm talking about your classic
quality
priority pick, whether it be end of first round.
End of first. I don't think you can stuff up the draft at the first round.
I think those days are done, aren't they?
End of first round, absolutely.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you.